Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, November 6th meeting of the Finance Committee of the Common Council to discuss proposed fiscal year 2025 budget. Committee members present this evening are committee members Adams, Farrell, Keegan, and myself, Frederick. We are also joined by our Resource Council, Jake Eastland, our City Clerk, Shaniqua Jackson, our Legislative Director, Brian Jimenez, our Junior Policy Analyst, Alyssa Kamara, and I believe that is everyone we have this evening. So at this point, we are in our deliberation period where we are talking through potential adjustments to the budget that we will propose, as well as getting clarification on bond ordinances, and so that's the main topics for this evening. We also have one more meeting on next Wednesday, the 13th, to hopefully wrap up and vote by the 18th. That being said, we do have a public comment signed up for this evening. So Canyon, if you can join us here up front, just make sure you state your name and address for the record, and you will have 5 minutes to go through your public comment on the budget.
Hello, thank you. Well, it's the day after the election. My name is Canyon. I'm from Albany 25 North Pine Ave is my address, and I'm here to speak tonight about the vacancy study. So, as you all likely know, last Monday the city released its vacancy study, which identified a vacancy rate of 8.33% in eligible buildings, which is too high to opt into rent stabilization. And as you also probably know, we are requesting $125,000 to support an outsourced vacancy study, both to validate the rate identified in the October 28th study and to address some concerns raised that were distributed in a short report to the council on November 3rd. Of the greatest concerns listed in the report are the timeline in which the study was conducted, the disinterest in addressing the question of allegedly eligible vacancies being marketed to prospective renters, the preemptive removal of substantial renovations and conversions, and the refusal to systematize site visits. With my brief time here tonight, I just want to raise some of these issues and explain our request. So regarding the timeline, the funding was appropriated with the anticipation that the study would be completed by May 2024. It was released October 28th, making it the longest study yet conducted. And this is relevant insofar as it granted landlords undue time to submit responses, which in one way could be considered to have benefited the completeness of the study, but also diluted the relevance and significance in the point in time being surveyed, as the study took place over a graduation period when 7,000 students graduated or transferred, summer break when thousands of students were moving, transferring, or relocating, and the closure of St. Rose College, leaving a gap of vacancies in the Pine Hills neighborhood. And I think it goes without saying, but summer is when most vacancies occur in the city of Albany, and that was anticipated to be the case, which is why the May deadline was requested. And it appears, at least in some part, that the study was delayed due to the interest in validating claimed exemptions from ETPA by landlords. And I think that this was really important to look into, but historically this has been the job of landlords to demonstrate to the Department of Housing and Community Renewal after a municipality opts into ETPA. Thus, we kind of considered this preemptive, unnecessary, and potentially excessive from the bounds of the study. It could have been done after the fact or after the project to assess the impact rather than to diminutive it. We believe that the questions of eligibility ought to be defined as well. Units without residential occupancy permits were considered eligible in this study. Of the 2,649 units and properties that reported vacancies, there were 2,462 units with valid ROPs, which is a difference of 187 units. If we were to remove the units without ROPs from the total vacancy count, or eligible unit count rather, of 4,681, since they should not be rented without an ROP and therefore shouldn't be counted. And if we removed 187 units from the 390 reported vacancies, since they should not be eligible to be rented without an ROP and therefore shouldn't be considered vacant, we would come to a total unit count of 4,494 and a total vacancy count of 203, which would actually bring the vacancy rate to 4.51. There's a list of examples in our report, but I just wanted to bring some to light here. 115 Phillips Street reported a 92% vacancy rate, a total of 11 units, as seen on page 19 of the report, yet none of the 12 units in the building had ROPs at the time of the study or even today. 55 South Lake reported a 25% vacancy rate, 12 units total, as seen on page 16 of the report, yet only 4 of their total 48 units have had ROPs in the last 6 years. And on page 22, 51 Elm Street reported 5 vacancies of 10 units, yet again the whole building was without 1 ROP. And even if we ignored the ROP question, if I saw those numbers, as I did, and I would immediately wonder what's going on, and I may conduct a site visit. And there's recognition of site visits being potentially biased in nature in the study, but my thinking is if the vacancy rate seems especially high and higher than others, then it would make sense to look into them. And I don't think it's biased to recognize that when you have a 50 to a 92% vacancy rate in one building, and the average vacancy rate is 8.33%, it might be worth checking out. Regarding the allocation request, we would hope to see an RFP study or released and a study done with the following in mind. As a result of this report, we have a list of seemingly exempt units that would not congest a redo. We have a list of likely eligible properties to contact with up-to-date info for at least 353 of the 429 eligible properties, or that were assumed to be eligible. And we also, as a result of the study, know that we should consider ROPs in their relation to rentable vacancies, the risk of potential warehousing and other data manipulations, and the question of ward vacancies being marketed and verifying that information, as well as the use of site visits on the basis of abnormally high vacancy rates. And I just want to close by saying that I don't wish to discount the months of labor put into the vacancy study by DNCS. It was an especially complicated task and assignment for which we are grateful that they were willing to take on, and for which we send our thanks to the staff, council, and administration.
Thank you for your comments. Okay. All right, so that was our last public comment for this evening, and so we're going to jump right into our items for discussion. We do have some clarifications on various bond ordinances that we paused on for further clarification. So with you have an attachment from Gideon, and we are going to just go through, if you haven't seen this or read this yet, I'm going to talk through the clarifications that we have. So if everyone has that paper in front of them, starting with Ordinance 39-102-24, an ordinance authorizing purchases of $650,000 to pay the cost of engineering streetlights capital improvements. We asked clarifying questions on this on why is it part of the capital plan. Responses received include there are several concepts at play as to how we finance maintenance expenses, whether expense can be considered a capital expense under GAAP, the applicability and allowability of amortization under New York State local finance law, policies of the entity making the expense. They say in the case of street lighting, they have certain expenses that meet the requirement of capital expense and may be financed with debt, and those that do not. As such, a budget has been proposed that allocates $650 in the capital fund and $190 in the general fund to accommodate both the capital and operating expenses needed for the streetlight system. Most of the maintenance expenses for the streetlight system are of a capital nature, as they involve installation of fixed assets whose useful life exceeds 1 year. These include adding light fixtures, replacing light fixtures that have been damaged or are beyond the useful life, and other expenditures that increase the capacity or useful life of the system. If the council is suggesting that as a matter of policy, these expenditures should not be financed with debt, a $650,000 addition to the general fund would be required. This would be similar to the city's policy of paying cash for passenger vehicles, despite the city's ability to bond for these expenditures over a 3-year period. Okay, so I skipped some elements of that, but that's the gist of the response we received back. Let's have a question or a comment from Councilmember Keegan.
My recollection of why we wanted to ask additional questions was because Councilmember Ballerin, who unfortunately wasn't with us tonight, had recalled that when we originally went through this process, they were supposed to be under warranty, and his question was more about, are we enforcing the full breadth of the warranty that we were supposed to have, and whether the expenses that are projected fall to something that's outside the warranty, which I don't think was answered. Yeah, I wasn't here when those were bonded, so I don't have a strong recollection of that, but
I-
he had asked that question.
Yeah, I don't remember any warranty on the lights, ever hearing about it, ever discussing it, ever having it come up.
I would add, if there was a warranty, I think part of the response is there that they're extending beyond their useful life, and so if there was a warranty, I'm sure it's only for the useful life that was originally listed, but I'm not even sure if there is one. Warranty, that is. So maybe Brian, if we can, since Mr. Ballerin, this is ultimately Mr. Ballerin's question, and he's also not with us until the 13th. Maybe we can get some more clarifying information on 39-102-24 around warranties of streetlights, but otherwise, this seems kind of comprehensive.
Yeah, I mean, I personally am happy to pass it through the committee. There's still an opportunity to vote on it on the floor, and if Councilmember Ballerin has concerns, we can.
I'm fine with that. Yeah. Okay. Do I have a motion?
I move that we move ordinance 39-102-24 through the committee with a positive recommendation.
Okay, motion from Councilmember Farrell, second from Councilmember Keegan. All those in favor? Aye. Ordinance 39-102-24 moves out of committee with a positive recommendation. Thank you. And please keep in mind that some of the clarifications we have do skip. We're still gathering some info. The next one down we have is 56-102-24. That's an ordinance to issue $500,000 of serial bonds to pay the cost of police station infrastructure improvements. The answer received is the $500,000 capital appropriation is for the renovation of South and Center Station lobbies. It includes reconfigurations for increased operational efficiencies, security upgrades, and restroom renovations. Any comments or questions on this clarification?
I would just say that I think that it's great that they're doing that. That's where the public goes into, and having our police station lobbies be safe, but also more up-to-date and welcoming, I think is a good thing. So I'm very happy to make a motion.
Perfect.
I move that we move ordinance 56-102-24 through the committee with a positive recommendation.
Is there a second? Second, motion from Councilmember Farrow, second from Councilmember Keegan. All those in favor? Aye. Ordinance 56-102-24 moves out of committee with a positive recommendation. Moving forward to ordinance 59-102-24. This is an ordinance for $300,000 to pay the cost of Albany Fire Department fire station infrastructure improvements. Response received is of that $300,000, $50,000 to $100,000 will be required to complete the storage building originally contemplated by the 2024 appropriation at the fire maintenance facility. High-value assets are currently stored outside at the maintenance facility and should be protected from the elements. The remaining funding, so we're talking approximately $200,000 to $250,000, will be used for the continued rehabilitation of the city's firehouses, some of which are over a century old. Kitchens, bathrooms, windows, masonry. Rehabilitation is constantly required. Okay.
I move for ordinance 59-102-24 to be moved out of committee with a positive recommendation.
Is there a second? Motion from Councilmember Keegan. We have a second from Councilmember Adams. All those in favor? Aye. Ordinance 59-102-24 moves out of Finance Committee with a positive recommendation. We also have some information on Ordinance 62-102-24. That was an issuance of $1,220,000 bonds to pay the cost of recreation playgrounds. We asked questions around the equipment being sought and additional information on fully inclusive, not just ADA compliant equipment. Generally speaking, the response we got back includes Recreation has contracted with a third-party consultant to conduct an evaluation of the inclusiveness and accessibility of our current playground equipment. This review will inform all future playground designs and which individual pieces of equipment will be purchased. Vendor information is not available as the project is subject to competitive bidding at this time. And they also state that recreation will also elicit community participation in selecting features for playground renovations. The results of these surveys conducted for projects appropriated in 2024 can be found below. So they're generally speaking there about their community input process. So I'm going to refer to Councilmember Keegan on this. Do you feel like the response received at this point is adequate?
I kind of want to know who the consultant is, and I would like to know what their experience and expertise is in actually doing what we were asking them to do since the last several budget cycles before I would want to move this. I don't know if everybody else is in agreement with me, but we're not going to be bidding on these until February, March anyway.
Yeah, I'm very happy to defer to you, Councilmember Keegan. What might be helpful, if you're willing, is to write up like questions, specific questions that you'd like to have, so we can get that information.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Thank you. So we're going to hold on 62-102-24 to seek further information on who the consultant is and what their specific qualifications are related to this. Okay. Councilmember Adams. Can we just make sure we're using our mics? I think it's yeah, thank you.
Sorry, the question or rebuttal to what was said was just trying to get clarification on if we're holding off on this ordinance, if there was going to be any additional questions beyond the ones that you're asking now to further hold off, or just like the previous ordinance, can we move this out and in between now and then get that information to you?
I do have concerns about what we're bonding for, because we, again, like last year, we held the bond and we asked for very specific things, and I created a memo of description for the types of equipment and assets that we were looking for. And I've continued to see project proposals that don't really align with what we asked for last year. So I really want to ensure that, and when I asked specific questions of the department for what those plans were, they once again said things like ADA swings, which is not what we asked for.
Right.
So I still feel like there's a significant disconnect between what we're looking for the city to build and implement versus what they're actually purchasing. And this is our ability to enforce what we want is through the bond action. So I would like to hold it.
That's totally fine. Just wanted to make sure I understood where, if there was going to be further questions, what direction it was going to go towards. So that answers it. Thank you.
Thank you both. Brian, are we able to get, I'm not seeing it on the active calendar, but 61-102-24 related to Albany South Community Center? I see West Hill listed. Unless I missed it. No, so I'm only seeing 60-102 and then it jumps to 62. We're missing 61 for Albany South, Hoffman. Okay. I'm going to walk through both of them. I just want a copy of 61 for folks. Thank you. Okay, so in addition, we requested some further breakdown for Albany West and Albany South, given that we are increasing the bonds allotted from the prior year to do these projects. So starting with 60-102-24, this was amending prior ordinance 66-102-23, which authorized $10,000 in lease financing, changing that number to $12,000 in lease financing, $12,000 10 million, yeah, not 12,000. Thank you. 10 million, changing that number to 12,000 of said serial. Oh my goodness. It's a weird day, folks. 10 million to 12 million, and then ultimately increasing the maximum estimated cost from 18,500,000 to 20,500,000. And you will see a table with some breakdown, so I will walk through that with us all. At the top, you're having your breakdown of debt versus federal funding, currently authorized, and then the anticipated request for 2025, adding two. To break down that approximate 20,500,000, we do have the following. We have the acquisition of the property priced at approximately $987,209. We have a needs assessment study at $89,561. We have the design estimated at $1,002,000. We have the construction administration estimated at $1,007,000. We have engineers construction estimate cost of $12,088,770. We have soft costs of $2,698,817. A contingency of $2,115,535, coming to a subtotal of $19,988,892. Additional alternates line of $164,765 to a total projected cost of $20,153,657, right under the threshold, rounding up to the $20,500,000. Comments, questions on the breakdown for Albany West that was received?
Okay, I'm happy to make a motion if you would like it.
I see no comments. I'll defer to Councilmember Farrell.
I move that we move ordinance 60-102-24 through the committee with a positive recommendation.
There's a motion from Councilmember Farrell. Is there a second? Second from Councilmember Keegan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ordinance 60-102-24 moves out of committee with a positive recommendation. Okay. On your desk, you have received ordinance 61-102-24. This is an ordinance amending prior authorization for ordinance 67-102-23 last year, changing the maximum estimated cost $5 million to $7,400,000 of serial bonds to pay the cost thereof Recreation Hoffman Community Center, increasing the maximum estimated cost from $7,750,000 to $10,150,000. And so the breakdown of that $10,150,000 has been provided again by Recreation here below. I'll walk through that. So starting with a needs assessment study, that estimate comes into $49,475. The design estimate is $513,180. Construction administration estimate $127,090. The engineer construction estimate is $6,626,564. The soft costs are $1,734,054, and the contingency is $743,166. I feel like I'm butchering numbers today. For a total project cost of $9,793,529. Again, a little bit of a difference of cushion here, give and take, but they're looking to estimate at $10,150,000 compared to the $9,793,000 estimate. I'm sure that's for additional costs that will come up beyond, but trying to maximize what their spend will be. Obviously, they don't need to borrow all this money if costs come in at a different price. Councilmember Keegan.
I would just note for anyone who's listening that what it looks like to me is that the growth in cost was not that we increased the scope of these projects, it's that the construction estimates came in substantially higher after the design was done, is what I'm seeing in the numbers here, and that's just all I wanted to understand when I asked to hold these, so I don't have any issue moving it out of committee.
Any other comments? Okay. Do I have a motion from Councilmember Keegan?
Sure. I move for ordinance 61-102-24 to be moved out of committee with a positive recommendation.
Is there a second? We have a motion, positive recommendation from Councilmember Keegan, second from Councilmember Farrell. All those in favor? Aye. Ordinance 61-102-24 moves out of committee with a positive recommendation. So just to level set what we still have remaining for bonds, we still have 41-102-24. That was for $3,366,000 for DGS Waste Management Plan. I just want to check in with staff. Do we have any information on that yet, or is Gideon still obtaining? Okay, so that one will be a hold. We also have 43-102-24 for $1 million for DGS public bathrooms. Still obtaining information on that as well. I think we had questions around, is that the price for one bathroom, or what locations would that include? Yeah.
Right, Alfredo had questions on that, because he wasn't at the DGS presentation.
Did that come in? Oh, let me see.
Yeah, I think it was just the locations that he was curious about.
Yeah, it was specifically the locations. So,
I'm again happy to move these along with other people.
yeah, and just for the record, it sounds like from a location, it looks like you said Crank Park and Buckingham Lake would be two locations for self-cleaning public bathrooms. Councilmember Keegan.
I just want to make sure I understand. So that means that we're looking at roughly a $500,000 investment for each park?
Let's give Brian a second. Looks like he might be printing out what we received there. We're going to pause on that for a second. I'm just going to go through what's still outstanding. So skipping 43-102-24, we still have 51-102-24 and 52-102-24. These are streets and sidewalks that we are waiting on the list for. And then finally, we have held tonight on 62-102-24 around playgrounds to get further clarification on the ADA compliance and the specific consultant that they're working with and their qualifications. Okay, thank you. And so coming back to 43-102-24, again, $1 million to authorize public bathroom installation. The response from our budget director is that the anticipated locations for 2025, hence the $1 million, are for Buckingham Lake and Crank Park. So to answer your question, Councilmember Keegan, I would estimate approximately $500,000 each for these self-cleaning facilities. Okay, Councilmember Keegan.
I'd like to make a motion for ordinance 43-102-24 with a positive recommendation on the committee.
Is there a second? Okay, we have a motion from Councilmember Adams for positive recommendation. We have a second from Councilmember Farrell. All is in favor? Aye. Ordinance 43-102-24 also moves out of Finance Committee with a positive recommendation. Okay, we will await further information on the waste management plan. We'll also wait for streets and sidewalks and also the information on the playgrounds, but I think we made good progress with the bond ordinances, so congratulations, everyone. Oh, yeah. Okay, now let's get into deliberation conversation around potential amendments we would like to put forward for the budget. So in front of you, I'd like to start with this more simplistic list. We'll talk about Okay, so starting with the more straightforward sheet, a collection of what we have heard throughout this budget cycle, various requests from various council members. Just going to run through first all of them super quick, and then we can talk about each one. So there's an increase there's a request to increase CPRB funding to $804,000 from their current stance. There's an increase to pursue a second vacancy study for housing, a $125,000 request. There's a request for additional animal control licensing to increase by $8,900. If you recall, that would allow for animal control to have access to the dog certification system that the city clerk has to help alleviate the steps and the processes they have to take to call the city clerk and access that data. We have requests to increase the Violence Prevention Task Force by $15,000. This is a budget that was created by the task force through the help of our violence prevention administrator to help produce supplies and promotion materials, etc., and attend some conferences. We have a request to increase Albany Fire Department training by $40,000. And I just want to clarify that this number came specifically from the budget director after speaking to AFD about what amount that they would like to potentially increase their training to do more advancements there. Obviously, we have a general interest in having in our budget intent memo a need to settle union contracts for blue collar. And then we have a conversation around the ethics and workforce audit funding. And I think we were seeking further information from our city auditor to see if we needed to increase any appropriations for that work. We also have an increase request on your desk to review the city clerk, their team, and their salary. And we will talk about that as well. So is there anything from a high level that is fundamentally missing from this list?
It looks like on the list, we're not talking about salaries, which we are not like, that's not one of the things that we can change, but we had talked about pushing for an additional animal control officer, which I know is not really part of things, but I figured I'd mention it. It might be worthwhile to just put into the budget intent memo.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Seeing, yeah. They're on page 57. 47, my apologies. Maximum range $45,000 to $51,914. $45,071 to a maximum of $51,914. Okay. Anything else that we might be missing from this list? Okay.
I just want to note that the total that we're looking to shift around comes to roughly $478,000 if we include the animal control officer salary. $418,000 without.
Okay. Let's do one thing here. Brian, is it possible to get a running list with a total if you have that already, that printed out. Like a running list with the changes and the total that we're talking about. I know you just did the math, but can we get that on paper? What?
The CPRB funding difference is $121,000. Then you have the $125,000 for the vacancy study, $8,900 for the licensing, $9,000, $15,000, $40,000. She noted that the audit may be a higher cost, so we went with $100,000. And then the animal control officer, if you land somewhere in the middle of the salary range with benefits, would be about $60K, which all adds up to roughly $478,000.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Thank you. Okay. So let's start. I do recognize a request to potentially at least continue the vacancy study conversation into the 13th when Councilmember Ballerin, who's a champion for that, is present. But we'll start first with the CPRB funding. Again, so currently in their budget, they have $683,010, and the request is to bring them up to $804,000, a difference of $120,990, as Councilmember Keegan just stated. And the $804,000, to be super clear, is the budget that they received last year. The $683,000 is a little bit over the 1% mandated that we have in our city, but it is, if you recall from our conversations with our budget director, the estimate they had after removing certain anticipated savings from coming into the city. Okay. I want to open the floor to any initial comments from committee members. Councilmember Adams?
In regards to the CPRB funding, my question or clarification is trying to understand the the difference amount that's being requested as they are asking, and what they can realistically be able to work with for this next year. Just trying to make sure that this amount is doable, but also not exceeding or over delivering on something that we're not sure we can do yet. So that's just my concern. And is this like the hard set amount that they really need?
Councilmember Farrow?
And I, first and foremost, am absolutely thrilled that the CPRB is coming into the city, and thank you so much. I know, Councilmember Frederick, you were very much involved in that, and to everybody that was, because I do think that that will ultimately solve a lot of the issues that they were experiencing, and hopefully will help them move forward. And one of those goals, as a side goal, like obviously the most important goal was to have them operate efficiently, be able to get the information that they need so that they can do the work, the very important work that they need to do. But another sidebar was as to save the city money, because there was no longer that duplication of services. They would be able to utilize the city services, budget and HR and all of those good things, so that they didn't have to pay for that themselves. And I certainly want to make sure that they have what they need in terms of, especially this year's a transition year, I do think that they'll need more in contracted expenses, and I would like to talk more about that line with them, because I think they're going to need that support, especially where they, if they're not able to hire people. I think that there does need to be flexibility with that, and there are funds built into the budget, but we might need to look at that. But the fact that their number is exactly the same number that they got last year does not feel like their requests were based on their needs, but rather to try to hit that exact same budget number, which that to me is not, I don't know why they need, you know, they're more furniture and more, why is that a necessary component? That to me wasn't really, you know, how did you come up with that number? It wasn't something, they don't even know where they are. So it's something where we now finally got where they are, but it just feels very like an arbitrary number that they were trying to get to, as opposed to really looking at their needs and trying to figure out exactly what they wanted. So I don't have an issue looking at their budget. I don't know that they need to get exactly what they got last year. And I do think that the pension should be noted on that. That is something I feel pretty strongly about. I don't think that that should be removed.
Councilmember Keegan.
I just have a couple comments. I mean, first and foremost, they're even within this budget, we're building out substantially more staff than what they had access to previously. And I do want to note that the way that this is built, because we're not going to be, I mean, we may be starting off the first of the year with the program director, but I don't think we're going to be starting off the first of the year with the confidential assistant or the investigator, which means that there is an opportunity to go through the E&A process to move some of that salary line item into contracted expenses so that they're able to continue their investigation work through contractors while we look to ramp up staffing. I mean, I think my other concern is, you know, I don't think that we are going to be able to find $250,000 in the budget. And so if we're going to do funding for the housing vacancy study, then we need to make compromises with regards to the CPRB and vice versa. I mean, I think that that is just the hard reality that we have in terms of what can be shifted around in the budget.
Thank you, everyone. Hear all the concerns and the comments and echo those as well. And just to add another layer to that, do recognize and appreciate the work that the CPRB does, and the fact that they mentioned that they would do more investigatory work, more cases, more efficient addressing of potential issues if they had more budget as well. So all things considered, I think what the next step we should do here is maybe hone in on that contracted services line, sounds like, and see what they propose, what we propose, and see if we can meet somewhere where there's a increase that we recognize that is needed, but maybe not coming into last year's number. So let's do that. So in the budget we have row 7,440 for contracted services, budgeted at 165,000 projected for this year. And in their presentation, I'm going to state that in their presentation to us, they propose contracted services to be right. They were looking at that number down there. Yeah, so I'm gonna back out some of those figures real quick. Looks like what they are proposing for that line, instead of 165 for contracted services, they are proposing $258,584.50. do, we'd round up, let me just do that now. So that's a difference of $93,000, 585. If I break down those contracted expenses, estimated at $258,585, that includes independent experts of $139,585. The notes that they provided is expense for professional services, including independent investigators, mediators, monitors, until house staff are hired and ready to investigate complaints. Includes expense for translation and interpretation services. Then that also includes $75,000 for independent counsel and litigation. The note for that is expense for independent counsel for various matters, including subpoena service, legal databases, etc. They also budget for a case management system of $31,000, and the line item is expense for case management system and maintenance. And then they budget $13,000 for outreach and public engagement, costs associated with public engagement and community awareness building activities. Okay. So, again, honing in on that number, if we were to meet the request, that would be a difference of $93,585. Comments from committee members? Councilmember Keegan.
I know I've noted this to you all many, many times over. I do not think that they will prevail in their attempts to subpoena officers. It directly violates the APD union contract, and it is a constitutional Fifth Amendment rights issue as well, because they don't have garrity protections. I think one of the pieces that I'm hoping will happen perhaps in this process of bringing them under the city is that we can look to better coordinate their investigations with internal affairs investigations, because I think the only way that we're really going to be able to marry their access to officers is for those investigators to be present when witnesses are being questioned by internal affairs, because that's the way that the APD contract is structured. You know, and until that sort of legal dilemma is resolved, we're sort of spending a lot of public dollars on something that I don't think will prevail in court.
Councilmember Farrell.
And I guess as we're going through this, I just find, I don't totally understand how this fits in with this, and I don't think they explained it really well, because this is, they're saying their 24 budget, and then this is what they expect the expenses to be. But I don't know, I mean, are these things worked in? I just don't totally understand. So is it something that we should be looking at the 165 to the 258? Is that what we should be doing? Because it's not clear to me. I'm assuming all of these things would be in the contracted services line, that they're pulling out the contracted services line.
Yes, I think you compare the 165 in the budget book to the 258.
To the 258, and that's how,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep. Then that gets us the difference of $93,585.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, is it like, I don't know. I mean, they certainly need the case management system.
Definitely. Yep.
You know, I think that there's all these different pieces to this that I guess it also depends on how much wiggle room we have, because when we're looking at, I guess from my perspective, what I think would be the best direction is to understand that that contracted services line is something that we should look at. But I think that we should be looking at the other expenses first, because we only have so much that we can do in the budget. So it's not something that, like, there's only so much room. So I really don't want to have us say, we really want to put in money for the housing study, but we can't because
Yep.
so I would rather have that discussion that we know that we'd like to look at that contracted services line, and then from there,
Mhm.
have the discussion about the other things, figure out how much wiggle room we really feel like we can have, and then go back to it. That would be my recommendation.
Understood. So,
And Ms. Jackson has her hand up.
yeah, so just before I go to our city clerk, I think, to be clear, I think there's no net change they're proposing for independent counsel, case management, outreach. That comes to a total of 119,000. So we're talking either them having 46,000, give and take with these numbers, right? The way I'm looking at this is they're having 46,000 potentially for independent experts, or we're, around the spectrum of increasing that, another 93,000, give and take. So, heard loud and clear. I think we need to look at that holistically, but we can generally agree this evening that we'd like to look to increase that contracted services line. City clerk.
Yes, thank you. So staff and I had a conversation with Chair Nairobi Vives yesterday in regards to their administrative services agency, the consultants that they are currently using. To date, that RFP is scheduled to expire, I want to say it's at December 31st. And they are adamantly looking to extend that and to get back into contract with their administrative services agency. Those consultants currently do everything that the program director will be doing as far as staffing the board, everything that the program director will be doing. To date, they have spent $115,000 on those consultants out of $145,000. She made it clear yesterday that they want to go back into contract with them, and because they're afraid that they're not going to have that program director and be fully staffed. She made it clear to us that this is something that they cannot do without. But I think because it's a contracted services line, that's something that we definitely have to consider. We'll have a program director, but if they are feeling that they need the additional support and their consultants to fully operate the CPRB, that's something that we have to further discuss.
Thank you for that information. One clarification point, so what you're saying is 145K budget for the whole year, and to date they have spent 115.
That is correct.
That's as of end of October, or as of?
That's as of end of October, yes.
End of October.
Mhm.
Okay, so understood that they would want to keep that administrative consultant as they transition and hire a program director, but when that program director is hired, which to everyone's benefit would hopefully be soon within fiscal year 25,
Yeah.
they would look to then alleviate that administrative service function.
They are not. They want to continue the consultant services as long as they possibly can, she said. Which makes no sense, because we're going to have that program director.
Yeah.
I can see if it was a training aspect where it could be a one-on-one transition period for the program director, then the program director is responsible for training the additional staff, including the board. But they feel that this is something that they need long-term in order to function.
I guess I would just bring it back to what I was saying before. We only have so much wiggle room in this budget, and I absolutely want to make sure that they have what they need. But the idea of prioritizing that over potentially everything else on this page is not something I'm comfortable with. So, I think it's something we should come back and revisit. And if we have the wiggle room, I'm happy to put it there, but it's also, would they actually need a full year? Because, they're hiring someone now, they should be really working to continue filling those positions. They wouldn't need an entire year. They would need a maximum of 6 months. And there is money built in, there is funding built into it. So to me, that's not something that should be held on to indefinitely. That's the point of bringing them into the city, and they need to wean off of them.
Thank you, Councilmember Farrell. Councilmember Keegan?
I just wanted to also note, if you look at, even if we pay absolutely no attention to the confidential assistant position, which we also haven't had a chance to fill, we just look at the 2 investigator positions, salary-wise, we'll probably land right around 150K by the time those folks are hired. So let's say we don't hire them until Q2. That gives you the wiggle room of about $37,000 that we can shift from that salary line into contracted services to get them through Q1. So if we were to, increase that line to 200,000 with the expectation that you'd probably have another 37,000 that you can pull from first quarter salary projections, that gets you to roughly about 67,000, which is, not 98,000, but it gives them about 67,000 extra dollars that can be put into contracted services. In my opinion, it would be the way that I would fall on that one, and they've got to stick to that budget.
Any other comments before we proceed to our next item, with the understanding that we're going to pursue increases to contracted services and need to work through what that number is holistically? Okay. Thank you, everyone. So let's, understanding that's a deeper conversation, I do want to maybe skip housing for now, jump to animal control licensing. Okay, so I would like to ask our city clerk for a little bit more clarification, because I know you got this quote, but again, just to rehash, during the concerns around animal control and the presentation from them, we learned during a caucus that they do not have access to the dog licensing platform that the city clerk does, and therefore, when issues arise, they are either calling the city clerk to see if that particular dog is licensed in our city, or they are just potentially not able to pursue any additional form of penalties without that level of information. And so I do believe that this is for a number of licenses, but I will defer to our city clerk for further details.
Yes, the 8,900 is for 5 additional users. So it'd be for the 3 animal control officers and 2 supervisors potentially.
Thank you. And the thought process there, originally in conversation, I was questioning 3 versus 5. I do think that the supervisors will also likely need access to that platform, and so that's why we were pursuing the total 5 new users. Comments on this proposed potential amendment? Councilmember Farrell.
This is something, it's not a big budget item, but it's something I'm pretty passionate about. We've had a lot of, anything that we can do to make the issues that we were having with animals and animal control better, I think we should do it, and that is a pretty reasonable budget item, so I am very much in favor of it.
Councilmember Keegan.
I was just going to say, I also wholeheartedly support us finding, this is not a lot of significant amount of money. And I do think it's necessary given some of the incidents that I have the same issues that Ginny has in my district, so I would say yes.
Councilmember Adams.
I would just agree with everyone's sentiments towards that. It seems like over the course of years, this has been a needed addition, and it makes sense at a low cost, so support it as well.
Okay. It sounds like we have good consensus on this floor. I think that's a small thing we heard that we were able to grab onto and hopefully make some improvements with all things animal control in our city. So we will be pursuing a amendment for 8,900 to add those additional 5 licenses for animal control. I will also note that, thank you, Councilmember Farrow, we will be including in our budget intent memo, in a council, interest in additional animal control officers, at least one for 60,000, although we cannot, add a salary, we would recommend that we have additional animal control officers in our city to address the animal issues that we face. Okay. Thank you. Next up, we have city clerk furniture and fixtures increase request for 9,000. I will defer to our city clerk for additional details.
Yes, thank you. So we received a quote from Davies' office. One quote being without Saturday delivery, it came in about $6,045, but knowing that I can't close the office for the full day for them to build and set up, I asked them for a quote to include Saturday delivery as well as installation. So that quote came out to be over the 5,000 that was proposed, and the total being for the main office, $7,130, and to do the deputy's office, since I have 2 staff sitting in that location, that total with Saturday delivery was $5,443. I can move my deputy and the violence prevention coordinator to another location during the week, but the main office, I can't close it down for the day. Yes.
And if we go to page 24, row 7,210, furnitures and fixtures is currently budgeted for the city clerk at 5,000. So I'm hearing a, just to say it back to you, we have a proposal totaling 2 components, 7,130 and 5,443, for a total of 12,573 compared to the 5,000 that's currently budgeted. That gets me to a difference of 7,573, and I see the request is for 9,000. Is there something else in there?
There was my office, but I'm not concerned about this. I'd rather wait on mine and have my staff get new furniture. So I think we were doing the additional cost for to cover my office as well.
Okay. And the furniture, just to clarify, is it a new desk, new chairs?
It will be new desks for the main office, is 4 new desk stations, and then the 2 for the deputy and the violence prevention coordinator. We've already replaced the back workstation this year, so it will be comparable to what we included now.
Thank you. Comments, questions from committee members?
I'm in favor of this. That has not been updated for a very long time, and our city clerk office, everybody works really hard, and they're also dealing with the public constantly. It's important to be able to sit in a good space, and I also will note that in terms of employee salaries, these are not our highest paid employees, and I think it's important to show them that we value them and the hard work that they do.
I don't have any concerns with this one either.
Okay. And just to clarify, team, do we want to pursue the 9,000 so we can also include our city clerk's office as part of that request?
I wouldn't have an issue with that. I mean, I guess the question that I would have for you is if it's something where it's phased next year, because I don't know if you have a plan for things next year, if it fits in easier with that. I guess that would be my only question. I don't have an issue bringing it to the 9,000 at all. I think that that's a difference of $1,500, and
My office couldn't wait. I'm really just concerned to make sure that my staff has what they need in order to operate day to day.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. So we will be pursuing an amendment for city clerk increase of furniture and fixtures for 9,000 with the caveat that if we have to land at 7,500 with an understanding that next year we will increase the extra office. Okay. All right, can we get a copy, Brian, of the Violence Prevention Task Force request to break down the 15,000? Thank you. I'm going to skip that one for now, and we're going to go to AFD training. So if we go to, just get to our budget book.
So the question I have with this is that they didn't know if they needed it or not.
So I will pull what I have. So this was further explored by our budget director. He did speak to the fire chief, and he spoke with Rob. My apologies. I believe deputy fire chief. And the note that I have, email fire training. Spoke with Rob. They were hoping for 100K total on training, so an add-on of 40K. That's the information that I received like yesterday. So we can ask. I would prefer that we ask for a better breakdown of what trainings or what additional trainings they would like to pursue for that 40K. Does anyone disagree with that? Okay, and Councilmember Keegan.
I don't, but I just also want to note for folks that, I mean, the last time the union asked the council for anything, it was for turnout gear. I mean, generally, they do not come to us asking for things, so if they actually showed up to budget and said, we don't have sufficient access to training, I'm going to assume that there is an actual issue that the members have. So that's my only concern with us declining this request, is that they don't typically ask us for things, and when they do, it's typically a legitimate ask.
And just for the record, that my comments were not to decline this request, but more so to seek further clarification. I do think our fire department should have the best training, the best access to training to serve our city. Councilmember Farrell.
I was just going to say the same thing. I don't think requesting further information is at all signifying that we're at all interested in not moving forward with this. I actually think this is very important to move forward with. But I do think if we're making an addition to the budget, we should do the due diligence and actually have the data behind it. I just think that that's what we should do in general. So I definitely don't think, and I want to be very clear with this because it's a public meeting, at no point did any of us ever think that we don't want to move forward with this, and asking for more information certainly does not insinuate that. I think it's important to do due diligence.
Agree. Okay. If no further comments on this for now, we will proceed forward. So we did hear in public comments from our blue-collar workers a strong disdain for the fact that their union contracts have not been settled yet, and they are some of our lowest paid employees in our city. So we will pursue strong language to encourage swift settlement of those outstanding union contracts within our budget intent memo. No. You want to? So any additional comments on what we heard, or pursuing that in our budget intent memo?
I think it's a great idea to include that in the budget intent memo. And I would, again, just appreciate, to Megan's point, like, we don't always have unions coming in to talk to us about things. Very much appreciate those union members coming in to advocate on that.
Absolutely. Okay. No worries. Oh yeah, we're a little bit under here. Okay. So we did have a typo in our master list here. We do actually have a request of 25,000, no, 26,000? 26,000, or 26,000, yeah, 26,000 increase for violence prevention from the Violence Prevention Task Force Coordinator. And on your desk, in front of you, have now received a breakdown of that request. So this was developed, I believe, from the subcommittees of the Violence Prevention Task Force that have been formed, and they thought through what their needs would be. Please keep in mind that the only there is no funding. The only funding we have is for the coordinator at present that we did last year. And so the first item that was requested is supplies and materials for $13,500. That is including $3,000 for educational materials, $2,500 for community resources such as informational guides, etc. $3,500 for community engagement tools, so workshop materials, presentation equipment. $3,500 for promotional items such as T-shirts, banners, and tabling, and $1,000 for administrative costs of printing and office supplies. I'm going to pause there. City Clerk, do you have anything additional you'd like to share on this?
All of the totals that you see here, they were developed with the subcommittees of the task force. They all came together and decided that this is what each subgroup will need in order for them to do outreach and further development of the task force. I don't believe that there's anything additional that they want to include. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I have one question, because it seems like there's some overlap, like the educational materials and the community resources. Are they putting together two separate things?
I want to say yes, being that there are 3 subgroups within the task force, and they have a community outreach group that will go out there and table at events, so they'll need supplies and materials for that. And then there's their professional development that they would like to have materials for. Like if they go out and do any tabling, any events in the community, they've been asked to come out and participate in other nonviolence programming, so they would like materials for that too.
Okay. Because it just, the way I'm reading this, it just seems like there's a couple areas where we're overlapping in terms of what they're asking for.
And, you know, we try to explain to the group that the supplies and materials line, because they had everything separated, we had them group everything together. I believe this is the way that Ramisha did it, is just so it will help the committees know, or the task force know exactly what the amount of money that's going to which group, so they'll know what to spend. Total 13.5, but each group, they'll know exactly, like I'll have 3,000 for this particular subgroup, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
I have just one more question. So this total, this miscellaneous contracted expenses and supplies and materials, we're adding that together and then we're subtracting the 10,000 that was already budgeted? Because there's the violence prevention activities budgeted for 10,000. And that's separate and distinct from the violence prevention coordinator position.
Yes.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Yeah, and
what
thank
we're
you
doing.
for that clarification, Councilmember Keegan. So if we all go to page,
Because I think that's how you got to the
22.
I think that's how you got to the 15,000, roughly.
Page 22, we have our violence prevention coordinator, row 7,000 up in personnel, already budgeted, that's their salary. And then we do, I misspoke, we do have row under contractual expenditures 40, we have row 7,306, so we have a total proposed budget of 10,000 already included. So when you do look at the request of 26,000, you have to subtract that 10, so the actual additional increase is 16, which is pretty in line with what we had on the paper, minus, or plus 1,000. Thank you for that. So, I do have an additional question, if you can answer. So I do see presentation equipment listed here as part of the community engagement tools budget, 3,500. Will they have, I assume they will have access to presentation equipment that the city has to like put on a slideshow, put on, project.
They
things of that
do, but
nature.
we've run into some technical difficulties in making sure that they can go live during meetings because they are at the library. And with our equipment, if we are running a meeting at the same time they are running a meeting, they can't go live. So we would need additional equipment in order to make sure that they are able to live stream their meetings as well.
I see. Thank you. Councilmember Adams.
Can they not use the PEG service equipment in the library?
I think what she's referring to is that they're going to need a laptop that they can live stream, correct? Part of that equipment?
She uses her own city-issued laptop, but as far as like a camera and any additional equipment that Brian you'll know more about the name of the equipment. They're not at the main library branch, they're at the Delaware branch. So their equipment, they don't have the same equipment over there, or any.
Councilmember Keegan, did you have something else? No. Okay. And I didn't go through the rest, so I just want to note these for the record. So the other request was for contracted services for 10,000. That includes professional training, workshops, and seminars for 6,000, and consulting services for program development of 4,000. They also have a request for miscellaneous of 2,500, inclusive of travel expenses for 2,000, and a set aside of 500 for unexpected expenses, so it's contingency. Councilmember Farrell.
I just would say I'm very much in favor of this increase. I think that safety is something that we have always had a focus on. We need to continue to have a focus on it, and this is exciting to have our violence prevention task force really be moving forward. And I think $16,000, especially if it can have an impact on safety in our city, seems very reasonable.
Councilmember Keegan.
I think one of the other things that we should consider too is that I do think that this, while we're calling it a task force, I think this is going to be long-term work. And currently, I'm not asking to put this in the budget, but I do think it's something that we should include in the budget memo, is considering whether or not we're going to increase the budget for the task force to include stipends so that they're equitably compensated in accordance with other people who are volunteering on boards and service to the city. Because again, I think the issues that they're grappling with may shift and adjust, and this is the group of folks that are going to be guiding the administration's policy as well as the city council's policy in terms of where are we putting our resources and what are we going to be doing in terms of legislation or programming to prevent the level of violence that we've been seeing in the community. So that's the other note I wanted to make on this, is that I think for next year we need to consider adding whatever it's going to be, 40K or whatever, for stipends.
I think that's an excellent point, and we will make a note to include that in our budget intent memo. I'm excited to see the growth of the Violence Prevention Task Force. We worked hard to get the prevention coordinator to really have a good, strong handle on this task force, and Ramisha Hill has been doing an excellent job organizing. We have a group of, I believe, 15 to 20 dedicated individuals at this point. So I am supportive of these additional funds for them to act upon what we have requested of them, and really get out there and be present in our city. And I'm also supportive of future potential stipends for volunteer board members, volunteer task force members. Any additional comments? Okay, so we will look to pursue an increase of $16,000 for the Violence Prevention Task Force. Okay, And our last item on the list here is related to the ethics and workforce audit funding. I know we had a conversation about potential needs for the audit department. I will defer to Councilmember Keegan if you have any initial comment on this particular item.
Sure. I mean, I think the conversation that I was having is that my understanding is that the auditor's office has funding for specifically to expend on audits. So my thought was first that we talk to the audit department to see whether that would fit into the scope of what they have for contracted services before we even start trying to find money in the budget. I don't know where we would find these funds at this point if we're also going to try to allocate another round of the housing vacancy study or increase the CPRB funding, because unless we're willing to dedicate a minimum of $75,000, it's not going to happen for this year. That committee is going to be starting the work, but we are all part-time people, and the scope and the breadth of the work that needs to be done to really address the complaints that were issued. I do think at some point we're going to need professional folks to come in and assist with that process. I am fully comfortable if the committee decides having that be part of the budget intent memo for this is, the committee is going to produce its initial findings and hand off that work for an additional audit to occur and provide the guidance for the RFP, and that be part of the budget intent memo. But, that simultaneously comes with, us essentially not really digging too deep into the complaints until 2026 as opposed to 2025. And I think folks need to be comfortable with us making that decision, because again, this is all stemming from something that came from our city workforce and from organized labor in the city. So, that's my perspective on this.
Thank you, Councilmember Keegan. And we are seeking clarification with the audit and control department to determine if they have enough budgeted to act on this request. And if not, want to hear from other committee members as well around interest around increasing their line and or including it in the budget intent memo. What I am seeing on their budget is, I think where their outside funding sits is part within line 7,451 professional audit. I know that they do professional audit services, but that is at 175,000. I think that might be included in there because the contracted services line is only 4,000, which substantially doesn't really make sense. So we will seek some clarification on if they have room in there for this projected audit that's forthcoming, but additional comments from council members, committee members. Councilmember Adams.
I support Councilwoman Keegan's suggestion to adding it to the intent memo. While I do think that this is worth the money and time to invest in to deep dive into this, I personally would support this before the vacancy. I feel like this is a much bigger and deeper issue that we really need to address, and continuing a full year with more complaints, more allegations continuing is going to make the situation even a lot worse, whereas we have already did one of these things and gotten results at the time, and if time continues to go on, we can address this back, the study, for next year, but we're making sure that we're invested into this right now, right away, in terms of the funding for the audit. That's my personal opinion at the moment. This, to me, feels like it's a very top priority for the city, that we should be investing into that right away.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams. Councilmember Farrell?
I would agree that I think it's something that's really important. I'm glad Councilmember Keegan is leading the way with this. And I'm very happy to see, I think this is, again, a situation where we have to see how much we can cut, how much what we really have the wiggle room for, and then go back to some of these big numbers and see exactly what we can do in each one of these different categories. And I will say, I think if we're looking at what our yeses are, we don't have a huge number. I would informally include the 40,000 for the fire department training. It's my expectation that we'll be including that in. That's clearly important. But, beyond that, I'm not sure how much wiggle room we have. Each year it's a little different, and we no longer have some of those supplements. So, but I think this is very, very important.
Councilmember Keegan?
Yeah, and I just want to say again that I'm trying to, and the way that I phrased this was specifically to build consensus around our budget priorities. It's not that this is not something that I don't want to do this year. It's more of, in looking at needing to find $418,000, I mean, the reality is we're not going to find $418,000. We're just not. And so there's going to have to be some give and take between, and this is one of the three real big ticket requests in the budget. And so I'm mostly trying to indicate to my colleagues at the table that I'm willing to kind of work with what we think is best. And if this winds up getting pawned off and we don't do it till 2026, that's what happens. But that's the impact, is that we've started this process. We've had people complaining to us for over a year now. We've had some really significant and severe allegations, and that means that we likely will not have an answer for those folks or any guidance for the administration until closer to 2027. That's just the reality if we don't allocate those funds. But I'm not gonna, hold everything else hostage specifically for this. If it goes in the budget intent memo, that's what happens, and I'm not gonna, have a meltdown.
Yeah, and I think that clarification is important. I appreciate you bringing that up, Ms. Keegan, because we're talking about our city staff have complained now, as you said, for over a year, potentially being delayed a further year. If we do indeed find that there's not room within audit and control, and furthermore don't pursue additional funding for this item, which is not something that personally, from my perspective, I would want to address these complaints as swiftly as we can with the appropriate level of due diligence. Okay, so we will seek further clarification on that item, and ultimately, it sounds like look to pursue some additional funding if that funding is not already found within audit and controls budget. We do have one additional document in front of you today, and that is from our city clerk related to some proposed changes to city clerk. We did talk about our furnitures and fixtures. We did also talk about our animal control licensing increases, but I do want to acknowledge that our city clerk's office did seem to be overlooked potentially in terms of some salary increases. And while we cannot adjust salary per our current understanding, I do think it's important to speak with the administration about this and lay out the information provided to see if that's a mayoral amendment that would like to be pursued. So, Councilmember Farrell.
If I can, so although it was a long discussion on moving to the salary ranges, one of the reasons why we moved to the salary ranges is so that there was flexibility for department heads to give raises mid-year. So it's my understanding that you can give your staff raises. You don't need to go through the budget process. And we've given, if you would like to have a review, so we can look at your salary, we can do that. But I don't think we need to do this through the budget process. We had to before we had the salary ranges, but that's why we have the salary ranges. So it's my understanding that you should be able to give your staff raises. And it's not, you don't have to do it during budget season. You can do it when it makes sense for your department. That was one of the big arguments for us to move to this, because in fairness, that's a difficult way to run a department, where you're like, all right, we got to do a raise now, and then if you don't, now there's the flexibility where, you know, if you just hired Reginald and he's only been here for a month, it's his only opportunity for a raise for a year. But now you can wait for Reggie to be here for a year, and you can do his review whenever it happens. So if there is, my request to you in terms of your staff salary would be to see what the process is, and if you have any issues, that is definitely something that leadership is very happy to help you with, because we want you, I mean, we need good people in the city clerk's office, and it is not a high salary, and I absolutely very much support you giving your staff salaries, raises, especially if they're people that you don't want to lose. Don't lose them. So you should absolutely be empowered to do that. Obviously, in a reasonable way. We only have, you know, but you should absolutely be empowered to do that. And if for some reason you're not, then that is absolutely a leadership issue. And we should look at, you know, leadership should come in and look at your salary. We increased our staff salaries in the past. We will again in the future. And so if there is something with that that is not accurate, then very happy, we have another meeting, we're very happy to revisit it, but it should be something that we're able to take care of, not in the scope of the budget process, which is ideal because we shouldn't be talking about individual salaries in a public meeting. It's just not, kind of yucky, so.
Thank you for that detail, Councilmember Farrell. I think we can take this conversation a little further offline. We do just want to reach a point of equalization, I think, of staff. There's some concerns there, as well as raises where deemed appropriate. I do want to ask a question, though, because I am seeing, I first want to acknowledge also increased involvement of our city clerk's office, including obviously the CPRB, coming underneath the council, et cetera. So there is significant work by your staff, and we do greatly appreciate everything you all do. And we understand the increases that have been also put on you over the recent year. With that, I'm seeing potentially a additional increase to contracted services outside of the, in the contracted services talks about the city clerk dog software for access to the animal control division. That being 8,900. Am I missing a approximate 11,100 piece? And what is that for?
Yes, so we, as the city clerk office, we oversee our GovQA, the FOIL system for the entire city. That cost came in at, where is it? I'm sorry. Brian, did you remember what that cost came in at? I'll get that cost to you. I think it was close to upwards of 3,000 for the FOIL system. And then we also have BAS, which is our licensing service. In addition to the additional 5 users, we'll have to pay for the current users that we do have. They've already mentioned that it will be an additional 5% on top of the cost last year. The cost last year's was about $2,700 or $2,800.
So just to clarify, the BAS system is the animal licensing system?
Yes.
And previously it was $2,700 to $2,800. You mentioned they have mentioned a 5% increase overall to that fee.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. And looking at the contracted services line budget for the city clerk that does currently project at 15,000. So we will be pursuing an increase of 8,900, which we talked about for the additional animal control licenses.
Yeah.
That would bring us to,
And just clarification on the GovQA for FOIL system, that quote was $8,397.65 for next year.
say that one more time.
$8,397.65.
Oh, okay, thank you. So that 15,000 already includes for contracted services, the FOIL system for
Yes.
3,000?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe for next meeting that we have on the 13th, if we can just break down that number a little bit with those systems on, a sheet, just so that we can understand what the difference actually is, the request above and beyond the additional control licenses, so we can have a discussion, that would be great.
Will do.
Okay, Councilmember Farrell.
I just have a random question. What happened to the bingo? No more bingo?
We do get occasional bingo. A few of the American Legions, they do bingo, so they have to come in and get a license from us. They have to report into us, and we report it to the state, so.
It's just, we're not getting revenue from bingo this year. I was like, what happened? Why is nobody playing bingo?
I see. Your office is a jack of all trades. Yes.
And I forgot to add, we are a passport acceptance facility, just like the U.S. Postal Service, so we get passport, like we process the applications on a daily basis too.
Thank you. Okay, so we are just taking a pulse on the committee. We are at 7:10. I do want to save the housing vacancy study for our discussion when Councilmember Ballerin is here. And we all are aware that that request is for a secondary study to be conducted. Is there any information that council members would like to have for that conversation on the 13th so that we can make a collective decision as a committee and vote, and prospectively vote on the budget on the 18th? Is there any information related to the housing vacancy study that we can take down to make sure that we come with ample information for the discussion? Councilmember Keegan.
I will say, I reviewed UTA's email and I looked at the housing vacancy study, and I felt like we were reading two different reports in the way that they characterized the way how the study was done. It was very clear that the study was initiated based upon who had ROPs with the city, and then further through tax records. When you look at the data set table, it's very clear that they did not count every single unit in the building towards their vacancy rate, based upon whether those units were marketable or not, is how they came to the conclusion of the endpoint of the data. So I did not understand where they were coming, when they made allegations about who has ROPs, who doesn't have ROPs and vacant units. I really wasn't able to determine where they came to us with that data of the 187 units in question.
Okay, so maybe a crosswalk or a mapping, better to
Well,
understand the figures.
I kind of, I feel like we're making a decision about that study without even talking to Neighborhood and Community Services about the study that was conducted for a lot of money in the budget. That was initially, that request was being asked for to complete the study, then the study was completed, then they didn't want the data or the way the study was completed, so now they're asking for us to redo the study. I'm not opposed necessarily to making the commitment to take the temperature of the vacancy rate again in 2026. I just think, if there's a different way to interpret the data, we already have the data. We don't need to go find the data again.
Thank you, Councilmember Keegan. Majority Leader Farrell, what are your thoughts around potentially inviting neighborhood services to our caucus on the 13th?
I think that we could certainly invite them to the caucus. I think it's probably a good idea to get more, like a more in-depth presentation on the report and to get some more methodology. I also would love information from UTA about exactly, what exactly, like, we're basing the 125, like, what are we basing that number on? They did share their analysis, but I wouldn't mind more information from them as well, personally. I don't know that that's entirely, I don't know the appropriate way to do that, because I'm also not really interested in like a back and forth situation. To me, it's not a debate. It's really trying to get just more due diligence on this issue. If we're going to be putting it in, and it might be something that we aren't able to have all the answers. And I think that's part of the discussion that we have to have, because it is a shortened timeline. That was part of the discussion with them initially when we didn't have the study, to say, their concern was that they didn't have it. So advocating having this as an option where it's not necessarily something that we would spend. We do have it. I think more information from neighborhood services would be really great. And I also think more information from UTA. And then I don't know that we'll be able to have a cut and dry answer in the short time period that we have. So we'll have to just compare in terms of how much we have and what we want to prioritize.
What I would propose is neighborhood services, we invite them to caucus if they are available, to provide a deeper dive into the study to all council members, because it's important information for all of us to know. And then we could invite UTA to come in for our subsequent finance committee meeting to specifically break down the 125 request and provide further detail. That way we're not having them back and forth, as you mentioned. Councilmember Adams and Councilmember Keegan.
I think that the study will be best discussed with the neighborhood services here to provide clarification to UTA and other advocates and people of the community as it relates to the report. I also think that a longer conversation needs to be had in terms of the vision and goal of this study. That also has to be discussed in terms of pursuing or opting into rent stabilization. If there was a study to come back and numbers were to change, that also has to be discussed as to making that decision. Because I'm also seeing and noticing that Kingston's having many issues in court with their housing study and some of the cases that have been presented. I don't want us to get roped into that before we have all the proper information and investing money into areas where we're not sure which direction things will go just yet. Fully support the study, but I think it could be put into the intent memo for us to look into for 2025.
Councilmember Keegan.
I just wanted to note one of the other concerns that I had, or things that came up, or arguments against the study that came up, was that Albany took a very long time with the study, but we had intended and budgeted for contracted services to be incorporated into our study as part of our methodology. And if you, again, read the report, because it was a presidential election year, they were unable to contract out for the follow-up phone calls as originally anticipated. And that work had to be conducted with the staff that we have, in addition to all of their other responsibilities. And that was one of the substantial delays in getting the study done, was the follow-up calls that had to occur. So again, like there's just certain pieces of the argument for us to redo this that just do not, in my mind, hold water. But we can talk about that with Alfredo next week.
Thank you. And similarly, I think we're at a point of conclusion. I just want to recap what we are going to discuss next week. And another thing I didn't mention at the beginning is I would like to discuss PEG funding with Councilmember Ballard President as well. So the list of what we will be covering is the housing vacancy study $125,000 request. We will be following up on additional information for the Albany Fire Department training that we support the increase of $40,000, and we will also be getting further information and have more conversation around the ethics and workforce audit funding. Finally, we will have additional breakdown information on the increase to contracted services for the city clerks above and beyond the additional animal control licenses. And then we will walk through the budget intent memo. I mentioned that we will discuss PEG, and then we will walk through the budget intent memo as well together. My hope is to get that out sooner rather than later. I know Brian and I are working on that. So as soon as we can, it will be in your inbox so that we can come to the table and have a fruitful discussion. Anything I am missing? Okay. And hopefully by then we also have a little bit more clarification on those outstanding bond ordinances for waste management, et cetera. Okay, with that, do I have a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting? Motion to adjourn by Councilmember Adams, second from Councilmember Keegan. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.